About 2 weeks ago, Donald Trump started with tariffs by putting them on China at a 10% rate. Now the effects are starting to be felt, and one of the biggest places that they're felt is by the
That was my phone falling out of my pocket.
home building industry. The New York Times recently came out with an article where they interviewed a few home builders, and these people talked about the increased prices that they're already seeing for things imported from China, like cabinetry, like tooling that they have to use to build things. Of course, now what certainly hasn't helped that is since then, 25% tariffs on steel and aluminum have been put into place. Those are big components of home building. And so what's happening is as home builders are looking to put in orders for their materials that have quotas, one, they're being asked to sign clauses in their contracts that allow for escalation of prices based on either tariffs or the possibility for increases in labor costs due to mass deportations that could happen. They're seeing delays on delivery because countries want to make sure that they can adjust their prices based on the tariffs, or exporters want to make sure. And it's incentivizing warehouses to stockpile materials. Yeah. It's incentivizing more ordering to happen up front. It's creating fear and uncertainty about where the prices could go from here. And that's an environment that just kind of fuels more and more inflation.
Yes, when people think inflation is coming, that means that they buy and purchase and stockpile as soon and as fast as possible, which then causes more inflation. And we see now we have not defeated inflation, or at least that the American economy is still open to specific supply side shocks that the United States has to be weary about. We just had an inflation report for the month of January. It showed a 0.5 increase month over month, one of the largest increases in about 2 years or something. It puts our core inflation at around 3.3% year over year, which means we have not defeated inflation, and 30% of that increase in CPI came from housing costs. Yeah. What Trump is doing right now, by putting tariffs on these raw materials, he is going to make the housing crisis worse, period. And this is something that American economists and policymakers have known for years. When you read Alexander Hamilton's writings and he talks about using tariffs, he makes it explicitly clear to not use them for raw materials. It would be stupid to use tariffs on input goods. That is exactly what Donald Trump is doing. We're not going out and we're buying steel at our local Walmart, but that Walmart was built with steel.
Yeah.
And it is a nightmare scenario for Donald Trump and honestly, a huge part of his base that voted for him to bring down housing costs, builders and contractors who voted for him for an easier and more reliable business environment, because for some reason, Americans trust Republicans more on the economy. So now we're in the situation where we have guys who have donated thousands of dollars to Donald Trump over the years, who are now facing direct economic consequences to Donald Trump being president directly in their pocketbook. However, a lot of them are not yet seeing the light here and recognizing that these things are directly tied to Trump, or they just don't care.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that there's a large contingency of people who think that Trump got elected specifically because of the Democrats' mismanagement of inflation. And now, right as inflation was kind of stalling out at the very bottom, it was stalling out at around 2.5% to 3%. It hadn't hit the Fed's target of 2%. We're now ticking back up, right? And a huge reason for that are these Trump policies that are incentivizing more buying. They're incentivizing bigger demand up front, pulling forward demand to potentially artificially increase some of these prices if the tariffs are used as a negotiating tool, but also actually putting tariffs on China, actually putting tariffs on aluminum and steel.
Actually going in and saying that he's going to do reciprocal tariffs against European companies. Now, European countries, this is important here, okay? Europe doesn't have that many tariffs on American products. There aren't that many actual tariffs on American products. Yes, for light trucks, there might be or something. But on the whole, Europe and America have a pretty open trading relationship. There are very few tariffs. What Donald Trump considers a tariff, though, might be different from what a textbook would consider a tariff. One example is the European VAT tax, the value added tax. That is how Europeans, it's basically a sales tax that applies to all goods. Well, guess what, guys? If Donald Trump considers the VAT tax a tariff, we are in for a massive inflationary spike that is going to devastate the economy.
Yeah, Trump is looking into these reciprocal tariffs not just for things like the VAT tax or for tariffs, but also for currency manipulation. And that's where you're going to, I would guess, see much higher tariffs on China than this initial 10% that we've gotten.
Yeah.
So you have a general inflation story here that is colliding with a housing story in a housing market where everybody knows that housing is the most unaffordable thing and the thing that people need the most in this country. I am curious because I have heard some rumblings and seen some data, specifically with how long houses are being listed on the market right now, that the activity of the housing market is slowing down. That makes sense, of course, because interest rates have been raised, which raises mortgage rates, and that dampens some of the demand for housing. I'm curious as to what so far sellers have generally been holding their homes on the market, hoping that a buyer will come in at their listed price.
This is only going to prolong that, right? The houses will stay on the market for longer as buyers try to pass, or sellers try to pass on their housing costs of construction or refurbishment onto the consumer now.
Well, I'm curious if this eventually breaks in a way that housing prices go down.
Oh, okay. It will always break in a way for housing prices to go down eventually.
Yes, in some places.
Yes. Housing prices are at a crazy high. They will collapse. Do not think real estate is a perfect end all, be all investment, because it's not. House is not an investment. It's a commodity. I'm glad you have one if you like it. It's not your retirement fund. That's not what it is. Don't expect a rate of return on it. But yes, Donald Trump is not helping the housing crisis at this moment, and he has no plan to do so, and his tariffs will only make it worse.